everyone, and welcome to episode 423 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have a big crew here this week. We have the usual crew, kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you today, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. Doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. We got some sweet news to talk about. We also got the Asian Avenger, probably better known as Krim. Good morning, Krim. How are you today?
Morning. How is everybody doing? I'm pretty excited because, I don't know, another week of Magic, so always good to talk about it.
Yes, we got plenty to talk about, and we even have a very special guest today to start off the podcast with us, and Joe Dyer, who does This Week in Legacy Vintage 101 on the website. We got some big Legacy news today with the B&R announcement, so Joe's been nice enough to join us for the start of the cast and talk a little bit about the Legacy B&R. So how are you today, Joe? Good to have you joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm doing really good. It's a good week.
Yeah. Yes, for Legacy players, I think some Legacy players kind of got their wish, something that's been talked about for a while, finally happening, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get into that in a minute. Overview, gonna kick things off with the B&R announcement today, which was mostly about Legacy, and then we got a bunch of smaller topics to get to after that. Shadows over Innistrad Remastered coming to Arena adding the ability to favorite cards, some Mark Rosewater comments about enchantments and Phyrexian cards, the return of Command Fest, a new Modern deck, and then your fish mail question. So that's the plan for today. Before we get into it, though, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit. And Card Conduit, they are the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So if you're tired of all the hassles that goes into buy listing your cards, Card Conduit lets you skip them. You don't got to do all the typing and spend all the time and do all their work. With the curated service, you can send in as many cards as you want with buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to put in a little bit of effort on your end, you can use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards ahead of time and pay just a 2% fee. And no matter which one you choose, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed. And right now, you can even get another 10% off if you head over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic, and let's kick things off with the big news of the day. Richard, we got a B&R announcement today impacting one format in specific. What actually changed on this B&R?
All right. Surprise B&R, and maybe the presence of Joe will tell you what format it's in. It's in Legacy. Expressive Iteration, banned. White Plume Adventurer, banned.
So Joe,
Expressive
you're
Yeah.
I'm never going to complain about that. That card's so busted. That card can go away in every format as far as I'm concerned.
It's only card. Modern legal now, right? Modern legal and
vintage.
I don't know how. I honest to God
historic
don't know
still, but historic, I don't know if that counts.
Luris is still legal, so
yeah. So this banning, it targeted really the top two decks in the metagame, which is It Delver in the mono white initiative deck. Joe, you were telling me before the cast that you collect a lot of data on tournaments. These decks were super prevalent in Legacy, right? Like, just how popular were these decks and powerful were they in Legacy to bring about this banning?
So both of these decks have been just kind of, since the mono white initiative deck kind of popped onto the scene when they first added those cards to Magic Online, they have just both been kind of climbing, and it's basically just been an arms race between both Blue Red Delver and with the mono white initiative deck. And we do a lot of data collection on the challenges and stuff like that for Magic Online, and both of these decks were about close to 20% of the metagame each. So this is, both these decks are close to 40-50% of the metagame just in the challenges and like the showcase challenges and the qualifier events that we collect on. And this data that I'm talking about right now, this is just since the beginning of January.
Wow.
That both of these have been this prevalent. And not only that, they're both around 52 to 53% win rates, non-mirror win rates. Yeah, go ahead.
So these decks are taking up like almost half the meta, and they're winning at an above average clip. So that's why they've been targeted. So my next question is, what do these bannings mean for these decks? Let's start with Mono White Initiative. They lose their key 3-drop, White Plume Adventure, their fastest initiative card. Does this mean that Mono White Initiative is just no longer a deck in Legacy, or do people like rebuild somehow? What do you think about the future of Initiative and Legacy with this banning?
I think there's always going to be some sort of like a white stompy deck. It isn't as fast or as good. They keep adding all these various 3 mana value white hate bearer creatures like Archon of Emeria and like Elite Spellbinder and those kind of cards, Anointed Peacekeeper. So there's always going to be a deck probably based around those cards. It's just that White Plume Adventurer really sped the deck up like a ton, simply because Initiative by itself lets you ramp to your 4-drop, Seasoned Dungeoneer really quickly by having that land that you get off of the first dungeon room.
Right.
But then also like just that curve of having this 3 mana threat that suddenly grows into a 5/5 the next turn, and then you're hit for 5 off of the trap room, and suddenly you're almost dead by turn 3. And so that doesn't even mean whatever they play on turn 2. So slowing that deck down a ton is pretty good. There's probably still room for a white-red version. Simply because having 8 initiative enablers in a deck is pretty good still, and having both of those be Seasoned Dungeoneer and Caves of Chaos Adventurer could still be a thing. But as far as like the straight mono white, I don't think it's as good as it was, and it kind of drops off a little bit. There's still room for Red Prison, which is the red stompy deck, to kind of move into that space a little bit as well, because they play a lot of strong 3-drops, Blood Moon, Goblin Rebel Master, that sort of thing.
I'm cool with that.
And then they also
always works.
Yeah, and then they're also playing Caves of Chaos Adventurer, so like you're still going to see the mechanic around. And if we ever get the rest of more cards from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate on Magic Online, we're still missing 3 cards out of that whole cycle. So we're still missing Ravenloft Adventurer, which is the black one, and Undermountain Adventurer, which is the green one. And Ravenloft Adventurer, I was at an event this weekend, and one of the decks in the top 8 was the black Sheoldred, Douthie Voidwalker, Helm of Obedience deck. That's a stompy deck, and they were playing 2 copies of Ravenloft Adventurer. So having that in that kind of fast mana shell, even though it's a 4 mana spell, pretty good. So I think we're still going to see the mechanic around. It's just not going to be as prevalent as it was before this.
So one of the things Wizards mentioned in the B&R was basically kind of what you said, that these 2 decks were pretty far ahead of the rest of the meta. So they felt like they needed to ban something from both Initiative and also the Is It Delver deck. We talked about Initiative. What about Delver? It's probably unrealistic to think Delver is going to be bad in Legacy. I don't think it's ever really been like not a deck, and that's probably not going to happen. Is Delver still the best deck in the format, or among the best decks in the format, even without expressive iteration?
I think so, yeah. I think it's still very good. But the nice thing about this is that we get to bring back some of the decks that were traditionally have good, even to favorable Delver matchups. One of the decks that was the problem with the Initiative and Delver metagame was that you could build a deck that was reasonably good against Delver, but you probably weren't so good against Initiative. Or you could build a deck that was really good against Initiative, but you maybe had a poor to even Delver matchup based on player skill. And there's a reason why some of the decks we saw during the course of this metagame that evolved into the metagame, such as Red Painter, Cephalid Breakfast, decks like that grew as part of the metagame because they had reasonably good matchups versus these 2 decks. At least one of them enough, plus also good matchups against the spread of decks. But there are decks like Green-White Depths and Lands and stuff like that that had very poor Initiative matchups. Those decks just did not win against that deck because when you are playing a deck that has 4 Swords of Plowshares plus 4 Solitude, plus the clock that is the Initiative, and those decks don't take the Initiative back that well. That's kind of one of the big issues. So those decks kind of get to come back a little bit. So that might be a little bit of a check on Delver, but Murktide Regent still exists. I know some people have talked about, well, what if we just pair Dragon's Race Channeler with Mistress Bauble and Predict? And I'm like, I'm actually okay with that. I am actually okay with that one because when I look at that engine, I see that as, okay, well, that hinges solely on one card existing on the battlefield, and that's Dragon's Race Channeler. You remove the Dragon's Race Channeler, and Predict is kind of not a good card. So that kind of is way better than playing Expressive Iteration, because Iteration was just absolutely insane. I think a lot of people realize by now with the ban in, I think it was at Pioneer that they banned it in. Yep. That card, the card quality that card presents is so good. Like, it's just, it got to the point where at the end here, Delver was playing 4 Volcanic Islands and a Steam Vents, and then they were playing Mystic Sanctuary for the entire purpose of being able to recur back Expressive Iteration off Mystic Sanctuary, just so they could keep casting, because a late game Expressive Iteration could easily turn the game around. Easily.
So much selection, being able to find exactly what you need on repeat. Yeah, very, very strong.
Yeah. But I do think there's going to be some interesting shifts. I think Reanimator has a chance to kind of shift a little bit more because they just got a brand new card. Because they just got Atraxa Grand Unifier. And so we're starting to see different builds of Reanimator show up, going back to blue-black builds of Reanimator showing up, because you could play multiple copies of Atraxa because it pitches to Force of Will and Grief and all these other cards. So there's options. I think it lets the format breathe a little bit.
I mean, I've heard a lot of complaints from Legacy players, just being at Magic Cons and so forth. Like, it seems like everyone was unhappy with where the format was. So hopefully this is a big positive change. And it seems like from what you're saying, it should be. It should give the format that breathing room. There's going to be new stuff to explore. It's not going to be just 2 decks anymore. Krimmer Richard, before we let Joe go off and do some writing about the bannings for his article, it should be going tomorrow on the website. Any questions for Joe while we got him here?
Yeah, I got a question for you, Joe. How do you feel the online metagame differs from the general paper metagame?
So there's some big...
I know the data is all Magic Online. I know the data you're tracking is Magic Online. I feel that every Magic Online player has an Izzet deck, whether it be Modern or Legacy. Like, they're just tied to this Izzet deck, no matter how bad it is. You can have a 30% win rate, they'll still play it because they love Delver-ish decks, even though there's no Delver in Modern. Is there a big difference? Is this skewed? Like you mentioned, kind of the Baldur's Gate cards missing from Moto. Yeah. Are we very skewed between paper and online, or are they generally close enough?
I was at a competitive event this weekend, and it was pretty close to a Magic Online event in terms of general metagaming. However, there is a bit of a skew, and the only major skew right now is the fact that we are missing some actual major cards on there, and that's stuff from the Warhammer 40,000 decks.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there are cards in there like Chaos Defiler is very playable, and the Painter shells. There's cards like Mawlock is very good in the Green Sun Zenith shells. Triumph of St. Catherine making blue-white miracles, just straight blue-white miracles, a legitimate possible thing again. So there are a number of cards in those decks. I do know that those are coming at some point. They're working on it. And then of course Infinity is also kind of a thing. The Eternal Legal cards from Infinity. It's weird to talk about it in that regards, but
are we kind of Cosmo?
Not Comet, but cards like Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is shown up quite a bit in paperless for Ad Nauseam Tendrils Storm decks because it's a green Past in Flames.
Mind Goblin, that one was all over the place.
Shout out to Peter Vanderham's Esper Stellar Funland Attractions deck. That was A+. Just absolutely 4 copies of Deadbeat Attendant. Just absolutely loving it, every bit of it. Yeah. I definitely appreciate it. But yeah, there are some cards from there. There's Embiggen for the Infect, but I think the biggest one is Paradise Lost. Having that for the Storm decks. I don't know if it makes them better, but it's definitely a really good card. It's 6,000 times better than Past in Flames. Like, it's just absolutely absurd. Passive Flames is like, oh, I get back to cast some spells from my graveyard. Paradise Lost says you get back like 12 cards from your graveyard to your hand. And it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah, there is that. And then there's still some older Commander stuff. Like, we're still missing parts of the Commander Legends set that they keep adding every set release. They keep adding more and more. Like I said, we're missing the rest of the Adventurer cycle. We're missing cards like Sailor's Bane, which is kind of like a Delvery kind of threat. We're missing cards like Abdul Adrian Gorian's Ward, which is basically like the white World Gorger Dragon card. So that card's missing, and that card's really good. So yeah, there's just tons of stuff that's still kind of missing. So there is some skew, but I think the Warhammer decks is like the biggest skew, and I think once we get those onto Magic Online, I think that'll be like a big push that'll help things a little bit more for like bringing the paper and the online metagame. The other thing you have to think about too is that paper metagames tend to shift a little slower, especially in local events. Local events, they tend to shift, especially if they're sanctioned events, due to card availability, card prices, that sort of thing. Reserve list being what it is, the person that has their, like Richard said, that person that has their blue-red Delver deck, or whatever it looks like, they're just going to add new cards to it every so often. But that's going to be what they're going to play because they own Volcanics. And they can't switch to playing like Doomsday or an Ancient Tomb deck or...
Hilariously, Paper Legacy is essentially the same as Magic Arena. Like when you talk about how people can't switch decks.
Yeah.
The reserve list and Arena are roughly the same, actually, yeah.
So you just don't switch there too often, but and Magic Online is a little bit better at that because of the rental services allowing people to switch on the fly. And people try things a little bit more, I find, on Magic Online. You get these... really these high class like legacy players like Matthew Vook and stuff like that who are trying very, very, very strongly to upset the metagame in any way they can, and they're dipping into really niche cards to do so. But I do think with Phyrexia, I think we got a lot of new cards, and I think that'll help. I think just getting new cards in general is very good for the format, and I think we'll see more stuff come up. I'm sure Mercurial Spelldancer, honestly, we'll see quite a bit of play now that we have this weird area where Delver can be explored again.
Yeah, I've seen Manguchi. Be very high on that card in Legacy.
It's honestly really cool. I've gotten to watch it see play a few times. I've been like really super high on Atraxa. I think Atraxa is like just like one of the best new giant fatty creatures in existence. That card just I got absolutely slaughtered by that card on Saturday. I was playing against Reanimator and they put one of those into play and they drew 7 cards off of it.
Yeah,
I love that Atraxa was initially written off as that's a commander thing.
Oh yeah, no,
and now
that's the secret code to look very carefully in Legacy Vintage.
Yeah,
that's a commander card. That's an Infinity card. Hold on.
Yeah, I had lethal painter combo staring them down in the face, and they out of the 7 cards they drew was a Faithless Looting, a Reanimation Spell, a Lotus Petal, a Dark Ritual, and a Sarah's Emissary. Cool. And I just lost on the spot. They reanimated a Sierra's Emissary and named artifact, and I did not draw anything else. So yeah, it looked really good, and I was just like, okay, yeah, this card's absolutely absurd. Like, and the fact that it's not just the fact that it's like good in like a Reanimator type shell, but like it's good to put in with like Show and Tell. It's green, so you can natural order for it. It pitches to every relevant force in the game that's playable, like force of will, negation, vigor, pitches to solitude, pitches to grief, pitches to endurance. Like that kind of floor of a card is just, you can't absolutely ignore it. It's so good. Yeah. So I think that's going to be good. And I've also seen cards like Vindictive Flamestoker and the Mycosynth Gardens showing up quite a bit because there's a guy that plays the Riddlesmith Containment Construct deck, and he's been playing Vindictive Flamestoker and Mycosynth Gardens. So
sweet.
Yeah, so Phyrexia gave us some toys, and I think that really helps this banning. By okay, now we got this banning. Now people can go play with these new toys and start figuring out some of these new cards.
Well, it sounds like a super exciting time for the Legacy format. So, Joe, we're going to let you go. You can go work on your article. But before you do, So on Tuesdays, you have This Week in Legacy. Thursdays, you have Vintage 101 on the MTG Goldfish website. Is there any place else people should be looking for you on the internet if they want to keep up on all your eternal wisdom?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at VolrathXP. That's basically where I tend to post things.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down for us. And check out Joe's article tomorrow on the website, where I'm sure we'll be talking even more about the banning. So,
yep.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
All right, so that is the world of Legacy. We got a bunch of other topics to get to today. Let's talk a little bit about Magic Arena. We got a couple of things happening on Arena. Krim, we got one thing I'm super hyped about that we've been asking for literally for years. They finally added the ability to favorite cards in basic lands. What do you think about this feature, Krim? How big of a deal is this for Arena?
It was a kind of annoying that every time I would make a new deck, I would have to essentially dig through all my lands. I don't know why they haven't allowed that yet with like Planeswalkers. Like example, I have like special arts of like the Wandering Emperor, but they keep putting the base like artwork in there. So it's cool. It's a nice little like quality of life kind of improvement. And I hope that they allow you to continue to do that with like just pretty much any card, which I know gets a little difficult because, there's a lot of cards in Magic. So, yeah. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's a fun thing. I don't know. It's not like, oh my God, this has made me spend less money on Arena. But like, it is one of those things where it's just nice, right? Like to have.
I think it's like, for me, it is a little push towards like buying card styles, buying like special basic lands. Cause I know there were a couple of times where there were like cool basics for sale and I almost bought them, but then I was like, well, there's no, I'm going to scroll through 20 pages of basics to find these every time I build a deck. So what's the point? It's just like a waste of money. So I think it does help a little bit there. I definitely agree that more of this would be good. Like being able to choose card styles for your planeswalkers and so forth would be super, super helpful. The other bit of Arena news, we had Alchemy come out, whatever. No one really cares about that anymore, but we do have Shadows over Innistrad Remastered coming out in a couple of weeks. We got some early spoilers for it, and I was curious, how big of an impact do you think this set is actually going to have? Like, assuming we get all the big hitters from this set, and nothing, is intentionally left out, is this going to be a shakeup for formats like Explorer, for formats like Historic? We've already seen Sigarda's Aid confirmed. We've seen Thing in the Ice. We've seen Relentless Dead. And then there's a bunch of other, like, Nahiri is going to be in the set. Anguish Unmaking's a pretty good card. Westville Abbey, Bedlam Reveler, Collective Brutality, Emmerical, Little Emmerical is on the Elder Deep Fiend. What do you think, Grim? Is this going to be impactful for those quote-unquote eternal formats on Arena?
I mean, yeah, like obviously Thing in the Ice is going to be one of the big ones. That's a thing that I've been like really looking forward to playing with, mostly just because of the blue-black tempo decks, the blue-red decks. Things like that are gonna really enjoy that card. Otherwise, is there anything else that gets played that wants anything from this set? I mean, I know I've seen Hidden Strings play. Yeah, Spirits is nice.
For more Explore, I would think, than Historic. But there's been, like, Spell Queller, Selfless Spirit decks that have made it in Pioneer with Collected Company, so maybe we get to see, like, yes, we have Mono Blue Spirits or whatever, the, like, Curious Obsession deck, but maybe we actually see some, like, bigger Coco-style Spirits decks now, so that one kind of sticks out. And I know there's been... I don't know how legit this is, but there's been some Hammer Time hype thanks to some new Phyrexia cards. There's like the new One Drop, there's a new Kemba.
Right.
Now that we have Sigarda's Aid, I don't know if that'll develop into like a legit deck, but I think something like Pioneer or Explorer Hammer Time becomes much more realistic with Sigarda's Aid. That's like the most important card to Colossus Hammer decks.
I am dreading it, but I think we are getting closer to Hidden Strings, right? So we'll now have Pour Over the Pages.
Pieces of the puzzle shows up in that deck sometimes.
Right. So we're getting closer to that, even though that is a miserable deck as well. However, I think that's okay. Why would we go back to Bant Spirits, I guess, is the question, right? Because if you're a Spirits player, I think Mono Blue is just strictly better, right? I mean, I do like, or maybe blue-white splashing Spell Queller. Spell Queller's really nice.
Card.
Right, like that's a good one because of Supreme Verdict. So that'll be pretty good. But then again, it's like, do any of these cards matter if there's a bunch of mono green decks?
I think right now in Pioneer, Azuria Spirits is like actually semi-popular. It's basically the mono blue deck, but you get Spell Queller, you get Skyclave Apparition, and you get Selfless Spirit. So maybe, but you still have the like put a Curious Obsession on my thing and counter all your stuff sort of like playstyle. So maybe like at least stuff like that'll be possible. Thing in the Ice is kind of a funny one because yes, that's a big missing piece of like the Arclight Phoenix decks, but still no Delve cards, like still no Treasure Cruise, still no Dig Through Time, and I think those are like the biggest missing pieces for something like Is It Phoenix style deck in Pioneer, and those at this point we still don't have those coming to Arena.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be one of the bigger things for Phoenix decks. But the nice thing here is there is the Dimir decks, the tempo decks, the Dimir mid-rangey decks, if you would. Those play like the full 4 as well. And that deck is probably something that now is complete, right? Because I think that was the only outside of Dig Through Time, I think those are just complete, right? So there's no replacement Dig Through Time, but there's things that you can kind of scrape by. Definitely a few tiers below, but still scrape by instead of having Dig. So those Dimir decks are pretty sweet otherwise.
What do you think, Richard? Does anything stand out on the list of possible inclusions from Shadows over Innistrad?
I look at these list of cards and I'm like, these are such boomer cards.
It wasn't even that long ago.
I'm like a Grim player. I'm like, wait, this is like stone unplayable in 2023, huh? I guess we're just looking for combo pieces in this set here. Like, what can we combo with? Because, like...
You mean Mythic Rare Grim Flayer isn't good this year?
Like, I used to play this in Modern, guys. I'm like, man.
God.
Like, look at this. It's just so fair and underwhelming. It feels so old. I don't know, man.
Were you doing what is it? Lingering Spirits or what? Oh, God,
Lingering Souls.
Lingering Souls.
The Lingering Souls.
Yeah, that's terrible.
That is some good.
It was actually a real. So there was a time in Modern where you went Abzan to like grind out everyone else with your Lingering Souls tokens, okay, Krim? That was a real strategy.
I know.
Yeah,
and then you siege Rhino them to top it off? Oh, baby.
Yeah. You can pitch Lingering Souls to your Liliana, the tokens, soak up your opponent's Liliana's Edict. It was like so good. Actually, the big question I have for you guys about this set, though, Emmerical the Promised End, theoretically, should be one of the chase cards in this set. As far as I'm aware, there's no cards on Arena that let you control your opponent's turn. Do you think they will add Emmerical to Arena? And do you think Arena will be able to handle you playing with your opponent's cards as you control their turn? Because it's pretty clunky on Moto. It seems like it's going to, like, how are they going to do it on Arena? Like, do you think there's any chance they leave Emmerical out just because they don't feel like programming a Mindslaver effect?
Well, that was going to lead to the next question, right? Because you still had, from what Amonkhet remastered, there are cards that were omitted from that, right? Like Fraying Sanity, things like that, yeah?
Yep.
So that, obviously, as Mill guy, that was one of the things I wanted to play with. But now I'm wondering, what happens in this set? What's the card that's randomly going to get left out? And as sad as it sounds... Is Emmerical one of them? No way, right? Like, that's the Shadows of Innistrad card.
Yeah.
It
right,
is,
like,
yeah.
There's no way. Although, I have to imagine there's something that's going to just get, like left out. I don't know, Voldaren Pariah or something like that. That we just aren't thinking of. Because I'm curious what card is getting left out from this, if there is one.
Well, there'll be some, because they're taking 2 sets and mashing it down into 1 set. So just like by the numbers game, some stuff's going to get left out. Hopefully it's like random bulk rares that no one cares about and no one actually remembers. But we saw with Fraying Sanity, like, that's an actual card that people want to play with. I think Fraying Sanity they left out because they printed Burvac like almost at the same time. It came out right alongside that Jumpstart. So I think they didn't want people like, whatever, to cannibalize the Jumpstart with Fraying Sanity. But what do you think, Richard? Are we going to get... We got to get Emmerical, right?
You must.
We must.
It would be such an epic fail. Like here's
it
like
is
the
Arena.
literal the box, the like the booster box has Emmerical on it, right? Like that's the
Right,
chase
right.
card. If you for whatever reason
Although it was banned.
cannot
It was
make
banned in
Emmerical,
standard.
like don't release the set. Like remaster some others. Like why would you remaster the set? Everyone's like, yeah, Emmerical, right? So I don't know. It's weird. Maybe they sneak it in. They say it's added, but then they like just ban it instantly, so you can't play with it. Like, oh, it's unfun because the client doesn't work, but we won't tell you that. But I have faith. I think you will switch perspective to your opponent, so you'll just play as if it's your deck.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Back.
Oh, that would be actually way smoother than how they do it on Magic Online. Yeah,
That sounds complicated though, so I'm not sure they'll be able to pull it off, given that they can't just add random cards. But they must. If they cannot, this is like a colossal failure, right? That means like 2 sets from now, there'll be new MTG mechanics that Arena won't support if they can't even support like handling someone's turn.
And sooner or later,
true,
they're going to
true.
want to put Mindslaver or whatever on there. Like, there's going to be other cards. So I guess it's worth getting it out of the way so they can actually have the effect on Arena. So, but that's coming out in 2 weeks, I think. The 23rd, I want to say, is the release date. What were you going to say, Krem?
Oh, well, I was going to say, yeah, like that, like there's still a few other cards that I'm worried about whether or not they get added. I think Emmerical is too big to not not include, right? So
Yeah.
I get that. And we'll obviously get Liliana Last Hope, right? That's what I'm hoping for. But I'm wondering, because this is something... Yeah, exactly. I am hoping, though, that legitimately we get Gyre Reach Sanitarium and Summary Dismissal.
Oh, are you going to build Narset Lock, Krem?
Yes,
You're going to build the Narset Lock
yes,
deck.
so
I know you.
100% I'm going to build the Narset Lock deck. Are you kidding me? Why would I not? So yeah, like I hope we get that. And Summary Dismissal is one of those things where you forget about it, but it is something that's still used as a miser, a one of, maybe two of out of sideboards. And maybe it's because of my deep love for Guillaume Wafatapa's deck lists. But like, he gets it. He just gets it. So like, I think that's a card that I hope they include, because I'm so worried. It feels like the cards that I'm excited to play with might get omitted from this stuff.
I mean, if you got to choose cards to omit, ones that Krim likes playing with would probably please the most Magic Arena players if you really think about it.
Look, you can't rule zero me in 60 card formats. All right, that's if I showed up to a modern or a PTQ and I said, "Oh, what turn does your deck win by?" Ooh, yeah. Can I rule zero your Ragavans out? Like,
how many free counters do you have? Yeah.
Yeah. Let me. I want to.
Can you take out that force of negation, please?
Yeah. If you don't hit me for a turn, I promise I will counter your next spell.
All right. Other news. Mark Rosewater, always asking interesting questions on their blog. Number one, there's 2 from Mero this week. First, there's been a lot of angst about Phyrexian language cards in boosters. This came up on the Pro Tour a little while ago with a pretty epic punt, because Reed Duke couldn't actually read Phyrexian. I think if you're a Magic Pro, that's part of your job, right? Shouldn't you just learn Phyrexian so you can know what your cards do? Reed's slacking. But I think Mark Rosewater said that he thinks it's a mistake, perhaps, that they put Phyrexian language cards into draft boosters. What do you think? Should they leave out these really hyped, cool printings from draft boosters for the sake of limited, where players may or may not be able to read them, and just leave them in collector boosters or whatever? Then you have the downside, though, that if you're buying the traditional cheapest packs, you're not going to have an option or the possibility of opening a Phyrexian Atlas Norn or something that's really exciting. What do you think of that trade-off? What would you do, Richard? Do you control WotC, Phyrexian cards and draft boosters, or no?
No, that is so ridiculous. So we have foreign language cards, right? For example, there's Korean cards or Japanese cards. However, up until recently, you opt into those, right? If you don't speak Korean, you don't need to buy Korean cards. You would buy an English booster box and you would get English cards, and you can be guaranteed to read all your cards. Now they started randomly adding Japanese Mystic Archives, Phyrexian language cards and things. You can't opt out of that. Like, you open the card, you can't read it, you can't play with it. It's very difficult, right? And so the existence of these cards is fine, but the fact that you can't even opt out of it when you're buying a product is weird. Draft boosters is supposed to be the cheapest thing to buy. I don't know, right? Like, there should be some base product where everything is readable and of the lowest price, so that if you just want cards to play with them, you're good to go. And if you want fancy versions, you have collector boosters. Set boosters supposed to be the non-draft version, so I'd argue that set boosters shouldn't have these special versions either. But I don't know. But even if you wanted to add special versions to these things, you need to get unreadable cards out of it. Like, why Phyrexian language cards, right? Like, get them out of it. Fun story. I was opening my set booster box from Phyrexia Alls 1. I pulled a Phyrexian Plains. My wife was like, "What's that card?" And I'm like, right?
Wow.
I'm like, this is the problem, right? Like, she knows Magic. She knows what the white mana is, but the art is like too distracting. And she's like, "What's this language?" And like, "What the heck is this thing?" She thought it was a like art card or something, right? And I'm like, how can you do this, right? So
Yeah.
I think Phyrexian is cool, but they should be like secret layers or like something special that you buy and not into your base products.
And you don't need to anymore, because we have draft boosters and set boosters and collector boosters and secret layer drops. Like, they can print all the cool things and not have it be an issue with people opening draft boosters or drafting them. Like, I think if you're going to make something called draft boosters, you might as well focus on making sure they're as good as possible for limited, because that's what they're designed for. And part of someone being able to sit down and have a draft is being able to actually read their cards and know what they do. So I would definitely lean on that side too. What do you think, Grim?
I mean, I don't play limited, right? So
is it because you
like,
can't read the cards?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the issue?
yeah. I don't play limited. I couldn't read the cards to begin with, so for me, Phyrexian is just whatever, right? Like, oh, cool, more cards I won't read, so this is great. I get it though. I understand like why you wouldn't want that, because like, you know, if example, like, you know how like a new player, they go and get into the game, they open this, and it's like, oh, what does this card do? So that's the only, if it's from a draft booster.
Yeah.
Set boosters, those are meant to be like kind of like, oh, cooler cards to get open, variant artworks and things like that. So I don't know. I guess keep the Phyrexian stuff out of like drafts.
You know what's terrible? Even if you have a phone, you can't even search it. What are you searching?
You can't read it to look
What
it
are
up.
you
Yeah.
Right? You're like,
What
hello.
does this card do?
Right? Like that's like how bad it is, right? You need to have a friend that can recognize the art. Or you need to like Google image search the art or something, right? Like, you can't, there's nothing to Google. There's not even like letters you can type, right? So yeah, it's weird.
So question number 2 for Mark Rosewater. And this one, we don't know Mark Rosewater's opinion on. He just posted this. It's just a poll on his blog. And the question is, should enchantments have their own frame? And the options are yes, but only when we're in an enchantment set of essentially, or no. Do frames even like?
What does this mean?
Well, artifacts
think
have
You
about-
mean like
their own
the bestow creatures or whatever have like that?
Like,
weird
yeah.
legendaries have like their weird frame. Bestow creatures have their own frame. Artifacts, I don't
Planeswalkers,
think
artifacts,
do
they do,
currently.
right?
Planeswalkers do. I don't think artifacts do anymore.
Wait, then what? Well, I guess I don't know. I guess maybe it's not their own frame, but it's like their own. Like, you could
Color.
tell what's an artifact, right? Like, it just
Can you?
looks like a.
What
Yeah,
about the
Is
colored
it just because of the
artifacts? Can
color?
you tell?
Like,
Yeah, like-
because
like-
it's like gray.
Yeah, it's like grayish, right? It's like more of a. You could tell which one is an artifact, which one isn't, and then if you start getting into old border, right? Obviously, you can definitely tell. But like current day, like I feel like artifacts definitely have a look to them.
So Rabbit
And I-
Battery has its own like it.
Yeah.
Like a red card, it has like a gray outside and
Yeah.
the red is inside.
Correct. It's like a very light. It's almost like pink, right?
So
I
does this
think
matter
enchantment
anymore
should.
though? Like here's my problem. Like, I think borders used to signify something, but now there's so many special borders and borderless and like masterpieces. Do borders even signify anything? Like, I feel like we're past the point where you can recognize a card by its art or recognize a card type by its border. because there's just so many special versions now that trick doesn't really work anymore, at least most of the time. I don't know. To me, that's
true.
I
But
guess
that's
I don't
against
care,
special
like-
treatments.
But I
Yeah.
look at it more through the lens of like having just recently to explain magic cards, right? And like how to get into it, right? Like I think it's easier if there's a certain type of border, is there not? Like, oh, enchantments look like this, artifacts look like this, planeswalkers look like this, right? I don't know. I mean, I still think there's a merit, definitely a merit to having enchantments look a specific way.
I would say, I mean, I think that's true. I'm not like against it. I just feel like visual cues have gotten a lot weaker in Magic in the last couple of years because there's so many weird printings that I don't rely on them as much as I used to.
Yeah, I like the journey into Nyx, where like you had enchantment creatures, so they had like a special frame so that you knew that, hey, this creature is like something special. I mean, it goes back to like Dryad Arbor, essentially, right? Where you hide the Dryad Arbor in your lands or whatever, and then people think it's a land or something. And like, what you're really complaining about is like the lack of visual indicator that like, hey, this thing is whatever. Or even like the green reach creatures, right? Like you don't know they have reach. If you had a visual indicator, it would clear that up. So I imagine the focus is like if you had disenchant and there was like a 10/10 creature, enchantment creature, that you didn't know you could disenchant it, you would feel bad afterwards. But I don't like, we have so many weird card types. Like if you had an enchantment artifact legendary creature or something, like what frame do you put on it at this point, right? Like it doesn't really like, I don't know, right? Our cards are so complicated. Or it's like a MDFC or DFC or something, like. So I see Seth's point that maybe it doesn't matter anymore, and maybe you recognize it's an enchantment, but it's in Phyrexian, so like whatever, like you don't even know, right?
You don't even know if you want to kill it anyway, yeah.
So I don't know. I see both sides of the argument. I think for ease of use, it should be there, but our cards are so complicated that it might not actually matter in practice.
So, news. We have the return of Command Fest. We haven't had Command Fest since pre-pandemic, I want to say. Maybe there was one during one of the like lulls in the pandemic, but anyway, Command Fest.
Didn't we
do
go
we
to
have one, Krim?
Yeah,
we literally
went
just
to
go to
Command
one. I'm
Fest?
confused.
Yeah, that was
it a
Command
Command
Fest.
Fest? Oh, okay. Well,
What's a Magic
apparently
Con
we
and what's a
have had
Command Fest?
No,
Magic a difference.
I think we need a special
border.
border for Command
Yeah.
Fest, so I know what kind of event I'm going to. Yeah.
You, me, and Tomer, we all went to one, right? That was Richmond.
Was that a Command Fest? Oh, that was a Command. I think you're right. I think that was a Command Fest. Well, they're back regardless. We have Command Fest coming back for March of the Machines. They're doing 4 of them in different places around the country: Richmond, Virginia, Indianapolis, Indiana, Orlando, Florida, Seattle, Washington, all the weekend of April 14th through 16th. You get some sweet promos. You hang out, you play Commander. Apparently, there's going to be like pre-release stuff going on for March of the Machines because it's pre-release weekend. Are you guys going to any of these? Are you gonna hit up a Command Fest with this run of Command Fest? Either one of you?
I probably will be. I am definitely looking to go back to either Richmond or Seattle. Most likely Richmond. And just because like to run it back. Richmond was fun last time. So I didn't mind it. I really liked what was happening in Richmond last time, and it's nice to. I also think I like it because like Richmond is away from like the city life, so I get to like
You get to go out in the country.
yeah I get to actually.
People in
Did
Richmond
you all
shambles.
know?
Isn't it a legit city?
Yeah. I will say
Yeah.
I could not get an Uber to the airport at like 6 a.m. That just did not exist. There were no Ubers in the city of Richmond, so I had to get a taxi.
Is it considered a suburb or a city or a rural area?
I want to. It's like, I think it's like the biggest city in Virginia or something. It is like a city, but it's like a million
Yeah.
people or something.
Oh, no.
A little
all
over
the
a million people.
unsubscribes coming from Virginia.
We love you, Virginia.
I loved Virginia. I loved it. Okay, I'll have you know. Okay, maybe it sounds bad, but look, coming from LA, where I don't even know what a tree is, like it's nice to know that I can actually see a tree. I can also actually take an Uber and have it not cost $90 to go 5 miles.
Wait, is Uber cheaper? Like,
yeah, dude. Wait,
I didn't know it was actually.
have you
different by
ever
city.
have you Ubered in LA?
Yeah,
Like,
but I
to-
thought that was just surge pricing. You're like, it's
LA
$5. 2 minutes later, it's like $96. I'm like, what happened here? Some concert just let out.
I have never seen LA not be in surge prices, dude. Like I am talking about like LAX, right? If you go for anywhere from LAX, even if it's 5 miles from it, it's like $70. So it's nice to go to like Richmond and just get away from it. It's a lot more spacious. At least I speak from a point of view where it's like San Francisco, LA. It's way more spacious than those places. So
no,
it's
it
nice
was
to
really
take-
cool. Like driving in from the airport, it's like rural almost. You're like driving through like woods and trees, and it doesn't feel. But it's only like 10 minutes from the city.
I get.
Like,
If Seth says this place is rural, I am very suspicious
It's
because
not.
Seth.
I mean,
Seth lives in the
I
middle of
should know
nowhere. And if he's
rural,
calling
right?
this place rural,
Wow, you know what? That would mean Seth definitely knows what he's talking about. That's the Seth.
Yeah,
stamp
I'm an
of-
expert. I'm an expert. On rural.
you gotta bring your axe out there. You know, you need to chop down some trees. You know, like.
The city was like super nice though. Like they had good food. Everything was close. So I might do Richmond again. If I do one, it'll be Richmond. That's the easiest one. Plus, I think Tomer said he was doing Richmond. Maybe so. I don't know. Maybe we run it back in Richmond for another year.
Did they say why they're all on the same weekend? Like, why don't they just put them on different weekends? So if you wanted, you could like do the whole tour
to more than
for
one
Command Fests.
I think it's to be so that the entire community from all coasts pretty much get to celebrate March of the Machines or something like that all at once, right? But what I was thinking is like, I don't know, I mentioned in our little like group chat thing, it's just like there could have been something cool because they're all happening the same weekend where like you have one, I don't know, it's not CDH, but like it's something cool that could sync up all 4 events that would happen. Like, hey, maybe a Commander player from each city get together and get in a pod, right?
It should be like Twitch plays Commander, where like your whole con controls one deck, and you all play against the other Magic Fest or Command Fest. Like, that would be epic.
Prove the best
fact that
Command Fest.
they had 4 of them simultaneously happening and nothing to link them across from each other is kind of a letdown. I know that they're all put on between like 4 different companies, right? Like it's like different like event companies, but I don't know. It's overarching. Like it's Magic in the year of multiverses and everything. Like how do you not? March of the, what is it, Machines? I keep calling it March of the Multiverse, but it is March of the Multiverse. If Thalia can ride the Gitrog monster, why the hell can we not have, like, you know what I mean? Like,
it would have been cool to have some sort of tie-in, I think, but I think the idea was also just the pre-release thing. I think they really want to hype up like pre-release weekend, have these big events. I don't know if you remember, like, this might even be before my era. I never went to one, but do you remember when they had like regional pre-releases? Do either one of you go to those where they would have these like just massive pre-release events for when a new set released? So it kind of, I think, is maybe trying to like replicate that feel a little bit with some Commander thrown in, which I think is a cool idea.
The difference is we know the cards now.
Yeah, that is a little different.
So the appeal and why it was so wild is just because you had no idea what was in them, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, all right, sure, let's see what we get.
All right, I got one more thing I got to ask you guys about before we get to fish mail. Richard, you're our resident mono white expert. So I was playing Modern the other day. Well, actually, no, I was writing the finance update. And I was like, why is Shining Shoal like spiking to $20 a copy? I've never seen anyone play that card. And then I was playing Modern and someone revealed a Chancellor of the Annex on me on turn 1. I was like, oh, they must be trying to like combo or something. And then they followed up with Champion of the Parish. And I was like, what is going on? So there's this new human deck, which is playing both of those cards, Shining Shoal, Chancellor of the Annex, and then a bunch of random humans, Champion of the Pair, like typical human aggro stuff, essentially. What do you think of this deck, Richard? When I first saw it, it just looked like the weirdest aggro deck I've ever seen. Is there any chance this deck is actually legit? Does this make sense? Should you be playing Chancellor?
This is kind of funny. So Shining Shoal is like it's kind of like a deflecting palm or something, right? It's like white X. You remove a white card with converted mana cost X from the game rather than paying X, and then the next X damage a source would deal to you. You deal to target creature player instead. And they have Chancellor of the Annex, which is a 7-drop, which taxes 1 mana, 1 on the next play if you reveal at the beginning of the game, and Emeria's Call, everyone's favorite MDFC, which is also a 7-drop. So I guess you Shining Shoal like a Murktide or something. Like someone smacks you with a Murktide, you Shining Shoal it, and you finish them off. Like what else?
Yeah.
Would this be for?
Mono white just went through hell and back for a bolt.
It's like actually not that bad, right? Because Solitude is also
Yeah.
5 mana, so you have basically 2 mana burn spell that no one sees coming. That actually
I
does
would never
a
expect it.
large clip of damage. Now that the deck is out, though, I think people would know what's up, and then you're totally screwed, right? Because it's so easy to play around. But if people didn't know what's up, I think this is hilarious. A 2 mana burn spell for like 8, 7.
Yeah, considering that like the top decks you have Murktide, which is a huge creature, then you have creativity decks that are putting Archon into play, which is another huge creature, and then you have Hammer Time, which is making 11/11s with Colossus Hammer or whatever. It kind of actually makes sense, the idea of like, I'm just going to chip in with my humans, get in some damage, and then once you attack me, I'm going to pitch this Chancellor of the Annex or whatever Emiria is called, a Shining Shoal, and just kill you. It kind of, oddly, in such a weird way, actually lines up with the meta. Although I think you're right, like, once people expect Shining Shoal and are playing around it, it just gets bad, right? Kind of like Deflecting Palm. Like if everyone's playing Deflecting Palm, it gets so much worse because people actually play around it. But if no one expects it, it's like absurd because you just get people so good.
But I'm curious though at the same time, how do you play around it if you're an aggro deck, like efficiently?
I guess that's like, are you going to play your Murktide and not attack? Are you going to play Archon and
like,
not attack? Like, I guess.
You hit like the same way you play around Deflecting Palm, right? Trust me, as a Tarmogoyf player, I play around Deflecting Palm. You chip in with like your Dragon Rage channel or stuff if you suspect, right? Or you have the mana to counter the Shining Shoulder. You don't tap out and just like run into it because they're mono white, they have no reach, right? Like you know it's coming. Like Hammer Time is hilarious. Like I don't know how Hammer Time would play around it, but like you just stop their combo, right? But yeah, maybe it's still good even if you can play around it. I don't know. Like 2 mana, 7 damage in mono white, like backed up by Thalia and crap, right? Like I don't know, right? But you're also playing like I don't know. Kythian. Like, is this good enough? Is this really gonna get there? Like I'm not sure about the rest of the shell. Like is this actually gonna get there?
Yeah, it does. It does kind of look like a Pioneer deck, a lot of it, with the like, Dauntless Bodyguard, Rafine's Informant, Luminarch Aspirant, and then you just have these like ridiculous cards. I don't know, I might have to give the deck a shot. Like, the idea is intriguing to me. We'll see if it has any staying power. It's a pretty new thing. It has put up like some decent finishes on Magic Online in like preliminaries or leagues over the past couple of weeks, but
so I'm looking at the players. So there are 2 players that just always play this deck: God's Shadow and Hank the Obese, and they do very well. This deck's been around for a while, apparently, and they keep playing it, and it keeps winning, so maybe it actually is legit here.
Anyway, I think those are all of our topics for today, but that means it's time for Fish Mail. Richard, take it away.
All right, if you have questions, send them on Twitter to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. Okay, let's talk about this one. Ron Belofsky. There's always talk about the validity or value of the reserve list. Question is, what would practically happen if they abolished the reserve list? Would the game struggle to survive or thrive? I had a shower thought this weekend, guys. And I'm like,
okay,
there's no point in buying cards anymore because they keep making secret layers to like make a newer version of my card, invalidating my existing card, or they keep power creeping my card. So the crux of that problem is my cards don't maintain their value. What if we made a list that's somehow guaranteed to keep the value of my cards? And I'm like, oh no, oh no, right? Like the original creation of the reserve list was because they made Chronicles, I think, and they basically tanked the value of cards and people were scared. Isn't that what's happening today where... Why buy Ragavan for like, I don't know, $100? Because you know it's being reprinted down into nothing. Or they're going to make a new... Let's say you bought Phyrexian Elish Norn, and then they reprinted it in like a normal set, and like now yours is worth a lot less. Reserve lists was supposed to save that. Maybe it didn't do its job, but is that not a problem? And if we just remove the reserve list, would that cause any issue with older cards? Because it's not increasing supply of older cards, the original cards, right? Just reprints. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I could almost get behind a reserve list for versions. Like, it's weird to me that you're like special promo, like Phyrexian Elishnorn's probably the biggest example. It's really weird to me that there was this super special like judge promo for Phyrexian Elishnorn, and then like a few years later they were just like, secret lair drop. Everyone can get one for $30 or whatever, along with a bunch of other cards. I could see that. I see what you're going for, and I think you are right. Players want their cards to be cheap when they're buying them, but then expensive when they're selling them, and you just can't have it both ways. So I think there is, I don't know. I think there is a concern about cards dropping too much, because it does like do what is happening to you. It just like takes away people's confidence for buying cards at all, which isn't a positive thing. But at the same time, you got to weigh that against cards just being too expensive, which also can push people away from the game. So I think there's got to be like some sort of middle ground there. And I don't think adding to the reserve list is a solution. As far as older cards, prices would drop. Like your revised dual lands are going to get meaningfully cheaper, I think. Alpha, beta, like legends, antiquities, those sets, it's not going to do anything. Those aren't even really game pieces anymore. They're just kind of collectibles, and printing new versions are not going to have any impact. But for like random Gaia's Cradle, some random Urza Saga card that's expensive primarily because it's a game piece, that's going to drop a lot in price. But is that like a negative? I see it as a positive, I think, overall. But maybe in this current climate where people are already feeling like you are, Richard, like, why would I buy cards because I'm just going to lose value on them? Maybe it would be too risky to take away the reserve list. What do you think, Grim?
Wait, what? I still don't understand what's wrong with losing the reserve list. I guess, like, how is that bad that they're like, what is the risk of losing that?
So I guess the risk is you have a Richard who has a bunch of dual lands from Revised, and he's already feeling like I don't really want to buy Magic cards because they're just going to go down in value, and then I'm going to lose a bunch of money on them. And then if you get rid of the reserve list, all of a sudden his dual lands are worth a lot less too, and he's just like, screw this game, I'm going to go play Snap.
Well, okay, let's be honest here.
Whoa, you made it sound almost so realistic. Just for the record, I don't like the reserve list.
Why? I don't know. I guess like, wouldn't you want people to play the game? Like, if why are we worried about someone that isn't trying to play the game?
Well, I think so. I think the issue would be something like, okay, the new set collector boosters, Lord of the Rings, whatever, right? Sure. It's like $500 for a box or something, right?
Okay.
If you don't have any confidence in the cards maintaining value, would you drop $500 for this box?
I mean, do you like playing the game? Right? Like that's,
but do you like it for $500? Like there is some implicit thing with Magic players where it used to be that $500 would maintain some amount of value, right? And there was this notion of like modern staples or legacy staples, which is no longer true due to like Modern Horizons and stuff like that. But like if you bought like a legacy deck for like $2,000, in the past you were assured that it would roughly maintain its price, if not go up, and you could always keep playing it. So the reserve list was supposed to tackle that price issue. But
I guess,
it caused other problems, obviously, right? It did it too well. So what do we do about new cards? Do we need something to protect their price? Like Wizards kind of did it with the serialized cards. Like no one's complaining about the serialized cards, right? The serialized cards have a number on them, and they effectively are reserve list, right? Because you're guaranteed there's only 500 worm coils or whatever, and there's no more. But nothing stops them from making another serialized worm coil of like a different art, right? But
sure,
but there is cheaper worm coils, thankfully.
Yeah.
Also,
that's why
there are
Seth's
cheap
thing of like just specific printings can be reserved list and not like the actual game piece. So you always have cheap game pieces available, but not any promo version available.
Right, and that's where example, that was precisely one of the things I was thinking of, is just like the serialized cards. That's like a promo that's allowing you to keep it like rare. Like sure, we don't necessarily need. I don't know. I just feel like in the current year, do we need to find another way to have a reserve list in a game? In this game, I don't think that it doesn't really matter, because I don't think we should, and because B, I don't think I guess this is speaking obviously from my perspective, but I'm not buying this game because I'm expecting value back from any of the cards. I've accepted a long time ago my Magic collection will go up and down and eventually become moot at the rate that things are getting reprinted or power crept out. But that's why, again, I just feel like if I'm trying to buy cardboard stocks, you know what I mean? I'm already at a loss.
I'm glad you mentioned the power creep, because I think that's actually probably a bigger issue with why people's cards are or people aren't feeling confident buying cards, because a few years ago you could feel pretty good about I'm gonna invest $1,000 in a modern deck, and this deck's gonna last me 5 years or something, maybe even 10 years, I should be able to play this for a long time and it's gonna be totally worth it. But now you're always kind of got this fear of oh, they could just totally power creep and make me spend hundreds of dollars to get Ragavans and Urza Sagas and Evoke Elementals. So I think that would be a better solution to giving people confidence in buying cards, is slow down with the rate of power creep, so your cards that you do have are actually relevant for longer, rather than keeping them from reprinting cards.
Yeah, so Wizards has done a good job of, good job. Okay, so they have maintained price through reprints, right? So when they drop Ragavan, they drop it at mythic rare in a higher priced product. So it basically maintains its price. Or at least drops temporarily and then goes back up. But like Seth said, the biggest fear is actually it getting power crept out of the format and therefore tanking its price. But back to the original question. Okay, so Underground Sea is $700-800 today. Let's say Wizards abolished the reserve list, okay, and they effectively put the price of new Underground Seas at $100. Maybe it's a secret lair pack or something. What do you think happens to the revised Underground Sea?
Ooh. So I think it loses I think it still commands a pretty big premium. Maybe it's, I don't know, $300 or something, a couple of times the price of the cheapest version. But I do think it would drop a lot from where it is now. I think alpha and beta, literally no change. If anything, they might go up in value as new players see it and learn about it, and then some of them have a lot of money in their whales and they go out and buy the super blinged out version to put in their modern deck or whatever, which is the alpha version or beta version. But I think the revised version would go down a bit. But I don't know. I think it's worth it. Yes, it's it's painful for people who own a bunch of those cards. I get it. And I do feel bad for those people, but I think it's one of the greater good things where in theory, having these cards be cheaper brings more people into the game. And overall, even if you're someone who has a bunch of those cards that drop in value, you would benefit by being able to play more. You could actually play Legacy with people, or maybe your other cards go up in value because now people are putting together Legacy decks because they can actually access the format. So I think it would even out in the end, and it wouldn't be as harmful to people who own those cards as maybe you think.
All right, I'm going to snap you back to reality here with 30th Anniversary Edition. So if Wizards ever decides to abolish the reserve list, do not believe for a second they'll sell you an Underground Sea for $10, $5, even $100. That was just a thought experiment. It will be $700. They will manipulate. It'll be a super duper mega mythic once in the case per continent type product, and it will end up at $700 to maintain the price. When they printed their proxies 30th anniversary, they made sure to keep the price equal to the existing collector's edition, right? Roughly. So if they, for whatever reason, give you an Underground Sea, it will be $700. Maybe they'll give you a 5% discount. Maybe it'll be $600 or something, right? But it will not be in your next standard set, you could open an Underground Sea as your rare. No, right? It's gonna be some super exclusive secret lair.
And that's why they might actually do it, I think. That's a way that right now they're looking wow, look at all these people making $700 a copy selling Underground Seas. Why is that not us? Why is that $700 not going into our pocket? So I think but you are right. people are probably overly optimistic about how big of an impact it would have, because Wizards is not going to just like, oh, here's $4 boosters with Power 9 in it or something. Like, they have shown very clearly that that's not in the cards at this point, even though that would be so sweet for players, but I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. So sweet. Thank you for that thought-provoking fish mail. If you have further questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 423 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, Graham, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to Joe for joining us. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And, of course, to everyone for listening. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So, until then, have a great week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.